Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping right in today, taking a look at a whole bunch of sources, all from June 25th, 2025.
That's right.
We've got Nigerian newspaper headlines, global stuff, even some, fun facts thrown in.
A real mix.
Yeah, exactly. And the mission today is simple. Cut through the noise, pull out the key insights, give you that shortcut to being informed without, reading everything yourself. We'll cover local Nigerian events, global affairs, just a really varied picture.
And what's interesting, I think, is how even these different pieces, these headlines, start to connect. You see themes, broader implications.
Right, connecting the dots.
Exactly. Not just what happened, but maybe why it matters in the bigger picture.
Okay, let's get into it then. Starting with the immediate political scene in Nigeria. Looks like President Tinubu and the National Assembly are getting some heat over the 2024 budget.
Yes, that was prominent.
Specifically, the Senate extended the implementation period all the way out to December. What does an extension like that usually signal? Is it common?
Well, it's not uncommon, but it definitely signals something. Usually it points to challenges. Could be delays in getting projects started, maybe revenue targets weren't met, or even, political hurdles in getting the funds released on time.
So it affects delivery, potentially.
Absolutely. It can impact public trust if things aren't happening when they were supposed to. It raises questions about efficiency and fiscal management.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, other legislative bits. The House of Reps is looking into problems with the National Health Insurance Scheme, the NHIS, and they're also planning to probe abandoned development centers across the country. Seems like a focus on follow-through.
Definitely looks like an emphasis on oversight, checking if these big programs like NHIS are actually working for people.
Right.
And the abandoned centers probe that speaks directly to accountability for public funds, ensuring money spent actually resulted in something tangible.
And interestingly, Tinubu declined to sign the National Assembly Library Trust Fund bill.
Yeah, I saw that. Declining assent like that, it sends a message, could be about fiscal priorities. Maybe it's seen as non-essential right now, or perhaps there are other political calculations involved. Presidents use that power carefully.
Okay, now for some pretty significant political shifts, Akwa Ibom State, a mass defection. 24 out of 26 lawmakers left the PDP for the APC. That's huge.
That is huge. Almost the entire state assembly switching sides. Wow.
What's the significance of something that dramatic?
Well, it's a major blow to the PDP in that state, obviously, and a massive consolidation of power for the APC there. It completely reshapes the political landscape in Akwa Ibom.
Yeah.
It could be driven by ideology, maybe strategic calculations for future elections, or it could reflect deep internal problems within the state PDP chapter. Either way, it's a big realignment.
And speaking of internal party issues, the PDP's National Executive Committee, the NEC, is still reportedly in crisis.
Seems ongoing, yes.
And even the Social Democratic Party, the SDP, had drama. Their Secretariat Gate apparently pulled down.
Right, signs of internal turmoil there, too. These internal party conflicts, they're, pretty characteristic of multi-party democracies. Struggles for control, different factions. It can get messy, but it's part of the process.
Meanwhile, you've got Governor Ikpeazu saying he wants to rebuild the PDP.
Showing resilience or trying to project it.
And Senator Ojudu is strongly denying those June 12 allegations against Tinubu, calling them false.
Yeah, that highlights how historical events, especially sensitive ones like June 12, remain really potent in current political debates. Shaping narratives is key.
Okay, just quickly touching on some other government things. Tinubu celebrated the comedian Alibaba at 60.
A nod to culture, perhaps.
And he mentioned wanting to replicate Abuja's infrastructure nationwide, which is hugely ambitious.
Very ambitious. The scale of that would be enormous.
And Lagos planning e-numbering for houses to tackle tax evasion.
Using tech for revenue collection. That's interesting.
Also, Les Herrera, the real estate authority, looking to regulate agent fees and commissions.
Okay, so these are quite practical moves. Infrastructure, tax, regulating specific markets like real estate. They all aim to have a direct impact, right?
Seems like it.
Better infrastructure improves lives and business. More tax revenue, theoretically, means more public services, and regulating fees responds to, likely, public complaints about costs. The big question always is effective implementation.
Definitely. Okay, let's shift gears now to security. And some of these headlines are really concerning. Over 100 killed in clashes between Belaturgi and Zamfara guards.
Yeah, that's a devastating number. Really highlights the severity of the banditry crisis and the kind of emergence of these local guard forces. It's complex and brutal.
And the IGP, the police chief, says 53 suspects were arrested over killings in Benue and Plateau.
So there's law enforcement action happening. But the scale of those killings in Benue and Plateau points to those deeper, very difficult issues: communal conflict, resources, maybe security failures.
Right. It's not just banditry, other security items too. The army had to condemn a video alleging an attack plan on the southeast. Misinformation is a weapon too, it seems.
Absolutely, a dangerous one.
Then, sadly, gunmen killed a police inspector in Plateau, took his rifle. A direct attack on the state.
Undermining law enforcement directly.
And on a different scale, police detained some masqueraders in Nasuka for assault.
Shows a range, doesn't it? From large-scale violence to very local public order issues.
Yeah. And police finding hidden weapons with a native doctor in Delta? Probing a death in an Abuja hotel.
It paints a picture of law enforcement stretched across so many different kinds of threats: large conflicts, direct attacks, community issues, hidden crime. It's a huge mandate.
And the drug situation, NDLEA seized over 800 kilos of drugs in Akwa Ibom. Arrested over 300 suspects.
That's a massive haul. Shows the scale of the trafficking problem, but also, significant enforcement action by the NDLEA. It's a constant battle.
Okay, let's look at the justice system angle. Peter Obi was reported as crying out about his brother's property allegedly being demolished in Lagos, called Nigeria lawless. Strong words.
Very strong words. It highlights concerns, whether justified in this specific case or not, around property rights and rule of law. That's fundamental.
And we also saw a court in Kwara convicting people for environmental offenses.
Right. The judiciary enforcing local regulations, public order.
And Professor Pat Utomi asking a court to dismiss a DSS suit related to those shadow government claims.
That shows people using the legal system to push back against state actions they see as perhaps overreach or politically motivated. So you see the courts as a place for redress, for challenge, and for enforcing basic rules.
Right. Okay, let's transition now. Economy and infrastructure. Big announcement.
Yeah.
$1 billion Brazilian-backed program, the GIP, to overhaul agriculture.
$1 billion. Yeah, that's potentially transformative for the agricultural sector.
How so? What could that do?
Well, Nigeria has huge agricultural potential, right? But productivity challenges, this kind of money could bring in new tech, improve how crops get from farm to market, boost food security, create jobs, especially rural jobs.
Big potential, though.
Huge potential. Key is making sure it's used effectively, reaches actual farmers. But it could really help diversify the economy away from just oil.
Okay. Infrastructure-wise, the AKK gas pipeline, the 614-kilometer one, has crossed the River Niger. That sounds like a major step.
It is. That's a critical piece of infrastructure. Getting gas from the south up north for power, for industry, very important for energy security and economic growth.
But on the other hand, the Port Harcourt refinery shutdown is now in its second month.
Right. And that's the other side of the coin. Progress on gas infrastructure, yes, but still struggling with refining capacity domestically.
Meaning still importing fuel.
Exactly.
Right.
Which costs foreign exchange, affects pump prices. So it's a mixed picture in the energy sector.
And the World Bank is advising Nigeria and others to scrap investment-stifling policies. What kind of policies did they usually mean?
Generally, things that make investors nervous or make it hard to do business. So inconsistent rules, red tape, maybe issues getting foreign currency out, lack of clarity on contracts or property rights.
Stuff that creates uncertainty.
Precisely. Their advice is basically create a stable, predictable environment and investment is more likely to flow in. That capital brings jobs, tech. It's crucial for growth.
Got it. Some positive business news, though. Dangote cement earnings crossed 1 trillion naira.
Wow. That's enormous. Shows continued strength in construction, infrastructure spending, maybe.
Seems likely. And Namath, a pharma company, recorded 103% revenue growth.
Very strong growth there. Points to potential in that sector. Healthcare, pharmaceuticals.
Air Peace added a new plane, an Embraer 190, and airline operators were actually praising the aviation minister, Kiyama.
That's interesting. Suggests maybe some positive developments or a better operating environment in the aviation sector lately. These are definitely bright spots.
Okay, shifting to social initiatives. Health. The student union, NNS, gave Minister Wyke an ultimatum over primary schools being closed in the FCT.
Right, highlighting concerns about access to basic education. That's fundamental.
UNICEF and IHS are helping 30,000 flood victims in Niger State.
Crucial humanitarian aid there. Climate change impacts are real.
And culturally, a new gallery for Benin bronzes being set up by Coronation and a museum commission.
That's a significant part of that global conversation about repatriation and cultural heritage.
Also, the government and Sumatex launched a green air conditioner line.
Okay, so sustainability focus there too. Interesting mix: education, aid, culture, environment. It really shows that development isn't just about economics, right? It's education, health, culture, responding to crises, looking after the environment. It's all interconnected.
Yeah, and more on health and education. Oyo State Assembly wants mental health education in schools.
That's very forward-thinking, addressing mental well-being early on. Really important.
Over 55,000 pregnant women benefited from an Ondo health scheme.
Great public health outcome, directly impacting maternal and child health.
And 15 colleges of education can now award degrees alongside the NCE certificate.
Expanding access to higher education, particularly for teachers, that's key for improving education quality long-term. These are all kind of foundational investments in people.
Definitely. Finally, on the local level, some friction points. MacBan, the cattle breeders group in Kaduna, is opposing ranching, while the FG plans a mixed grazing model.
The herder-farmer issue. That remains incredibly sensitive and complex. Finding models that work for everyone is tough.
And Ebony residents rejecting open grazing too. Same theme.
Exactly. Shows the local resistance and the need for community buy-in on these land use policies.
And in Lagos, residents upset about a potential hike in waste disposal tariffs by the PSP operators, with Lame investigating.
Classic example of public service costs hitting people's pockets. Leads to calls for justification, transparency. These local issues show where policy meets everyday life, often with some tension.
Okay, let's widen the lens now. Global affairs from the sources. Pretty tense stuff. Netanyahu in Israel vowing to stop Iran rebuilding its nuclear program.
Yeah, that rhetoric keeps regional tensions extremely high. The nuclear question with Iran is a constant point of friction.
And the UK is bringing back nuclear weapon-capable aircraft under NATO.
That's a significant defense posture move, likely a response to the broader security situation in Europe, Russia's actions. It's about deterrence in a, more contested world.
So heightened global security concerns all around.
Seems that way. Nuclear issues, strategic positioning. It reflects a less stable environment.
In Nigeria's role, the government is monitoring the Israel-Iran ceasefire, reviewing evacuation plans for Nigerians there.
Standard practice for responsible governments looking after their citizens abroad in volatile regions. Shows diplomatic engagement, too.
President Tinubu also received the Queen of Denmark.
Diplomatic ties, likely trade and cooperation discussions there, important relationships.
And Nigeria is partnering with India to halt codeine syrup production.
That's a really interesting example of transnational cooperation on a specific, serious problem. Tackling illicit drug production often requires working across borders. Shows Nigeria playing a role in global public health and security.
Right. Okay, let's cleanse the palate a bit. Time for our Did You Know facts. Always enjoy these.
Me too. A nice detour.
Did you know the troposphere, that's the lowest bit of our atmosphere where we live, is where basically all weather happens?
The weather layer.
Yeah. Temperature drops as you go up, and it holds most of the water vapor. Right. So clouds, rain, storms, it all starts there.
Makes sense. It's literally our living environment, the air shell.
And here's one for puzzle fans. Someone who enjoys crossword puzzles is called a cruciverbalist.
Cruciverbalist, I like that. There's a word for everything, isn't there?
Apparently so.
Yeah.
It's funny how we go from global security to, the air we breathe and word puzzles.
Keeps things in perspective.
Okay, and finally today in history, for June 25th, two big ones. 1950, the Korean War began. North Korea invaded the South.
A huge moment in the Cold War. Became this major international conflict, a proxy war, the division, the tension. Its legacy is still so present.
Absolutely. Ended with an armistice in 53,
yeah,
but technically never a peace treaty.
Still divided, still a geopolitical flashpoint.
Then, June 25th, 1967, the world's first live global satellite TV show, Our World.
Wow, I remember hearing about that. Groundbreaking stuff.
Yeah, BBC production, artists from 19 countries.
Mm-hmm.
And the Beatles premiered All You Need Is Love, lived to an estimated 400 million people.
400 million. In 1967, that's incredible. Imagine the logistics. It really was the dawn of global media, connecting the planet visually in real time like never before. A powerful moment.
Totally different kinds of world-changing events on the same date.
History's like that, full of contrasts.
So wrapping up, It's amazing how much ground we've covered just from one-day sources. Nigerian politics, security worries, economic moves, global tensions, history, even word puzzles.
It really is a rich tapestry.
And it really drives home that idea, doesn't it? That being informed means seeing how these different threads, local and global, kind of weave together.
Absolutely. Understanding the context, seeing the patterns, thinking critically about how one thing might influence another, that's where the real insight comes from. Hopefully this deep dive helps you do just that.
So as a final thought to leave you with, something to mull over, Sheryl Sandberg said, when you want to change things, you won't please everyone.
That resonates.
Think about that in relation to all the changes, the conflicts, the policy shifts we talked about today, the budget fights, the defections, the grazing debates, even global power shifts. It seems true everywhere.
Change inevitably creates friction.
So reflect on that. What stood out most to you from today's dive? What connections did you make, or what might you want to look into further yourself? Until next time.